He didn't slam the door. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't ask why or demand an explanation. He just looked at me, really looked at me, and I swear, in that moment, I saw something inside him break. It was quick, quiet, and irreversible. Then he turned, walked out of the room, and I haven't heard from him since. And all of it, every bit of it, started with a joke, a stupid, careless joke. It wasn't even meant to hurt him. It wasn't even meant for him, but he heard it. Every word, every laugh, every moment I let it happen. And that's all it took. It was supposed to be fun, just a casual night in with my closest friends, pizza wine music playing low in the background. The kind of night where you take off your makeup, kick off your shoes, and talk freely. Too freely, maybe. One friend asked about our relationships, and the stories started pouring out. Funny things our boyfriends did, their habits, their quirks. One friend joked that her man had no clue how to fold laundry. Another said hers cried during Disney movies, and then someone laughing turned to me and asked, "What about yours? He's sweet, but is he actually confident in bed?" And before I could stop myself, I laughed too. That nervous, performative laugh, the kind you do when you're trying to match the energy in the room. I shrugged, smiled, and said, "Let's just say he's not exactly intimidating." The girls burst out laughing. Someone said, "Oh my God, how small are we talking?" And I didn't say anything, but I didn't stop them either. I didn't defend him. I didn't shut it down. I just laughed along. I thought it was harmless, a joke. Just girls being girls, nothing serious, nothing real. Until I turned around and saw him standing in the doorway. He had come back early, quiet as ever, the kind of quiet that made you forget he was even there. And apparently he had been there long enough to hear everything. I froze. Everyone did. The laughter died immediately, replaced by a thick silence. He didn't say my name, didn't ask what we were talking about. He just stared at me, his face unreadable. I opened my mouth to say anything, but no words came out. And then he turned, walked away, and didn't look back. That was the moment everything changed. 1 second of thoughtlessness, one small attempt to be funny, one ugly little laugh that told him more than I ever intended. This is the story of how I lost someone good, really good, over a joke I didn't even believe in. And how sometimes it's not betrayal or cheating or screaming matches that end a relationship. Sometimes it's the moment they realize you didn't protect their dignity when it mattered most. He was never the type to take up too much space. He didn't need to be the loudest in the room. He didn't interrupt conversations to prove a point or crack jokes to get a laugh. He was the man who let others talk first, who listened more than he spoke, who observed before he acted. And maybe to some that came off as shy, even passive. But to me, it was one of the first things I noticed, and one of the things I fell for hardest. We met at a bookstore. I was in the self-help section pretending I knew what I was looking for, and he was there to buy a gift for his sister. He helped me reach a book from the top shelf and said something quietly, something I didn't even fully hear, but I smiled anyway because it didn't matter. His presence was calm, unassuming. It made me feel safe. Our first dates weren't extravagant. He didn't try to impress me with expensive restaurants or wild stories about himself. He asked questions, real ones. And when I answered, he listened like every word mattered. There was a softness in his eyes, the kind that told you he wasn't planning an escape or waiting to talk about himself. He was fully there with me in every moment. When he held my hand, it was never forceful. It was gentle, protective, like he was cradling something precious. And that's how he treated me, like someone worth taking care of, not in a possessive way, but with quiet attentiveness. He'd text me to drink water when I was stressed, leave notes in my bag before big meetings, and remember the small details most people forgot. I once told him offhandedly that my favorite flower wasn't roses, it was freesias. 3 months later, on a random Tuesday, he showed up with a bouquet of them because I figured you could use a little lift. He didn't believe in grand gestures. His love was made of little things, thoughtful things. And while other men tried to sweep me off my feet with drama or adrenaline, he gave me something I didn't even know I was missing: peace. But there was something else about him too, something quieter, a wound maybe, an unspoken fear. He carried it like a secret wrapped under layers of kindness and silence. I could feel it sometimes in how he'd hesitate before undressing in front of me, or how he'd tense up when other men made crude jokes. I never asked, never pressed, because I thought we had an understanding. That the way I loved him softly completely was enough to drown out whatever made him second-guess his worth. He never said it outright, but I could tell there were parts of him he didn't fully believe were enough. He never bragged about himself, never talked about past conquests, or tried to prove his masculinity. He didn't have to. Not to me, because I saw him as strong in ways most people couldn't recognize. He was emotionally available, open-hearted, brave enough to be vulnerable. And for a while, I thought that was all that mattered. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it was honest. We didn't scream when we fought. We didn't play games. If I was upset, he sat with me through it. If he was hurting, I had to pay closer attention because he wouldn't say it out loud, but he'd show it in a quiet change of tone in the way his hands would fidget or how he'd look away when I asked if he was okay. But even the best love needs tending, and I see now that I got comfortable. Too comfortable. I assumed he'd always understand, always be there, always forgive the moments I didn't realize were hurting him. I mistook his silence for resilience. I assumed that just because he didn't say anything, he was fine. That my little mistakes didn't land as deeply as they did. The truth is, men like him, quiet, sensitive, deeply kind, are often the ones who feel the most. They just don't always show it the way we expect, and so when we cross a line, they don't yell. They withdraw. When they're hurt, they don't retaliate. They retreat, and if we're not careful, we don't notice until they're already gone. I remember one night, months before everything fell apart, we were lying in bed and I teased him gently playfully about how quiet he was in public. I said, "Sometimes I wish you were a little more bold, just a little more alpha." I laughed when I said it. I didn't mean anything by it, but he went quiet. I remember him saying, "Is that what you really want?" I told him no. I kissed his cheek and brushed it off, but I see now that moment stayed with him. It lodged itself somewhere deep, waiting. And when he heard me laughing with my friends, when he heard them joking about things I'd never even said to him directly, it didn't come out of nowhere. It came from every tiny moment he had already doubted himself, every small joke that had chipped away at something he was too proud or too scared to name. He had trusted me with those insecurities, and I laughed at them even if only for a second, even if I didn't mean to, and sometimes that's all it takes to lose someone who gave you everything. My friends have always been the bold ones, the loud ones, the kind of girls who fill a room with noise and laughter and opinions, who say what they think without filtering for feelings or consequences. I loved them for it. I envied them honestly. Their ability to say anything and not care who was listening. Their fearless sarcasm. Their brutal honesty. With them, nothing was sacred. Everything was fair game if it meant getting a laugh or telling a better story. And for the most part, that energy was infectious. You felt cool around them. Witty. Unapologetic. I liked how free I felt in their presence, like I could say things I'd normally hesitate to voice, and it would be met with laughter, not judgment. But there's a fine line between freedom and recklessness, and I didn't see it until it was too late. We had a routine. Every few weeks, one of us would host a girls' night. Wine, snacks, sweatpants, and no filters. It was our sacred space. We'd talk about everything: sex work, relationships, trauma, old drama, new flings. We'd roast our exes, hype each other up, and tear down anything we deemed worthy of mockery in the moment. It wasn't meant to be cruel, just honest, raw. We said things to each other that we'd never say in public. That's what made it feel safe. But there's a danger in mistaking safe for harmless, because some things stick. Some jokes cut deeper than they seem to, especially when they're about people who aren't there to defend themselves, and especially when they come from the person who's supposed to love them most. That night I hosted. It had been a few weeks since we'd all gathered. I was tired from work, and honestly, my relationship had felt a little distant lately. Not bad, just muted. He'd been quiet. I'd been busy. We were moving through the motions like roommates more than partners, so I looked forward to the distraction. I wanted to laugh again, to feel light, to reconnect with a part of myself that wasn't always so gentle and careful. The conversation turned to sex, as it often did. Someone mentioned a bad experience, another joked about her partner's lack of confidence, and soon the room was erupting with stories, funny, exaggerated, and totally unfiltered. I remember someone asking, "What about your guy? He's so sweet." But is he shy in the bedroom too? I laughed. I shouldn't have, but I did. It was that reflex kind of laugh, the kind you give when everyone's watching and you don't want to be the buzzkill. And that's when it happened. One of them, my oldest friend, joked, "I bet he's one of those guys who apologizes after." The room exploded. I laughed too, nervously, too loudly. Someone added, "Wait, didn't you say once he was not exactly impressive?" I don't even remember if I did. But in that moment, I didn't say no. I didn't say yes either. I just smiled, sipped my wine, and let the laughter keep rolling. What I didn't know, what I would only find out seconds later, was that he was home. He had come back early from his friend's place. He had walked in during the middle of our conversation, quiet as always, unannounced. And he had stood there just outside the living room listening, long enough to hear the laughter, long enough to hear his name used as a punchline, long enough to feel betrayed in a way no explanation could erase. He didn't say anything, not then. He didn't burst in or make a scene. He just turned around and left. It wasn't until one of my friends glanced up, went pale, and whispered, "Wasn't that your door?" that I realized something was wrong. I stood up, heart racing, ran to the hallway. He was gone. His keys weren't on the hook. His shoes were missing from the mat, and that's when the dread set in. The girls tried to brush it off at first. He probably didn't hear much. It was just a joke. He'll understand it wasn't serious. But I knew better. I knew him. I knew how deeply he felt things even when he didn't say it out loud. I knew how hard it was for him to open up, how much trust it took for him to be vulnerable. And I had shattered that trust for what? A laugh. A fleeting moment of approval. I tried to text him, then call, then text again. No response. I walked back into the living room in a daze, suddenly aware of how hollow the laughter had been, how cheap, how cruel. My friends shifted in their seats, looking uncomfortable now. Guilty. One of them tried to apologize, but the damage was done. I didn't blame them, not really. I blamed myself, because I knew better. I was the one who knew his heart, his fears, his history. I knew the exact thing that would cut deepest, and I let it happen anyway. The irony, he had never once made fun of me, never mocked my insecurities, never shared private things with his friends for sport. He loved me in the most respectful, tender way, and I let a room full of people who barely knew him tear that down in a matter of minutes. I handed them the knife, and he caught the blade. That night taught me something I wish I hadn't learned the hard way. Just because a joke makes people laugh doesn't mean it's worth telling, especially when the cost is someone's dignity, especially when that someone trusted you not to laugh at their expense. There's a moment right before everything falls apart when you don't yet realize the ground beneath you is about to give way. You're still smiling, you're still laughing, you think everything's fine. And then, in a breath, it changes. It's that shift in the air you feel before you know why. That silence that suddenly feels too still. That look on someone's face that tells you everything even when they say nothing at all. That was the moment for me. The exact second my world tilted. We were all sitting in the living room, me and my friends, glasses of wine, half-full voices rising over each other as the conversation got bolder and messier. The room was warm, almost hazy from the mix of alcohol and low lighting and that false sense of safety you feel when you're with people who've known you too long to filter your words. We'd been laughing for hours and everything felt light, carefree, fun, until it wasn't. I remember the joke that led to it. Someone said, "Okay, but seriously, what's your man's biggest flaw?" And without thinking, without pausing, I said, "He overthinks everything, even in bed." There were giggles. Someone said, "Ugh, the over-apologizers." Another added, "That usually means they're trying to make up for, well, being underwhelming." And I laughed. Not because I agreed, not because it was true, but because everyone else was laughing. And I wanted to belong in that moment more than I wanted to protect him, more than I wanted to be kind. So I laughed, loud and careless and stupid, and then I heard the door closing softly. Not a slam, not the dramatic kind that makes everyone stop and turn. No, it was almost imperceptible, but I heard it, and I knew. I stood up, heart suddenly thudding, and walked to the hallway. His keys were gone, his shoes too. My stomach dropped. I looked around, trying to piece together how long he must have been standing there. The front door hadn't creaked open until just a few seconds ago, but had he been listening longer? Had he heard the whole thing? Or just enough? As if that mattered. I rushed outside, but the street was empty. No footsteps, no car. Just night air, and the echo of what I had just done. I went back inside in a daze. My friends were quiet now. The mood had collapsed. One of them said, "Oh my God, do you think he heard that I didn't answer?" I couldn't. I sat down on the couch and stared at the wine in my glass like it had betrayed me. My phone buzzed. A message. I opened it, praying it was him, hoping he would give me a chance to explain, but it was from a friend in the room. "I'm so sorry. I didn't think he was home." That's when the panic really set in. I called him, straight to voicemail. I texted him. Nothing. I sent message after message telling him it wasn't what it sounded like, that I didn't mean it, that the jokes were stupid and I should have stopped them. Still nothing. Hours passed. Everyone else left eventually, quiet and awkward. I didn't blame them. I was barely present, staring at the front door like I could will it open. But it didn't. That night I lay in our bed alone. Every sound in the apartment felt louder than usual, the hum of the fridge, the ticking of the clock, the creak of the floorboards. But the loudest sound was the absence of him. No rustling in the sheets, no soft breathing beside me. Just emptiness. And me staring at the ceiling, hearing my own laughter replay over and over again in my head, followed by the look on his face as I saw him turn away. The worst part is, I don't know exactly what he heard. Maybe it was just my laugh. Maybe it was one line out of context. Or maybe he stood there long enough to hear everything, to feel like the most private, vulnerable parts of himself had been turned into a joke, and that the person he trusted the most didn't stop it. I thought about what I would do if it were me. If I had overheard him mocking something I was already insecure about. If I had trusted him with a part of myself I struggled to accept, and then heard him making fun of it with his friends. I wouldn't need to hear a lot to feel betrayed. Just one line, just one laugh. And that's the thing. It wasn't just the words. It was the betrayal of being made small by someone who's supposed to make you feel safe. It was being laughed at in a room you thought would always hold your dignity sacred. He didn't walk in during a fight. He didn't catch a misunderstanding. He walked in during a moment when I showed who I really was, or at least who I was willing to become when I thought he wasn't watching. And that was what broke him. He was the man who held space for me in ways no one else had, who loved me gently without making me feel like I had to earn it. And I made him the punchline in front of people who didn't even know his story. That wasn't just a mistake. That was betrayal. And when he walked out that night, I think deep down I knew. He wasn't just leaving the room. He was leaving me. That night, sleep never came. I lay in our bed, the sheets still holding the shape of his body from the night before, my eyes fixed on the ceiling, like maybe if I stared long enough I could turn back time. My phone sat on the nightstand like a loaded gun. Every time it buzzed, I flinched, but it was never him. Just messages from friends who had been there that night, all of them saying the same thing in different words. "I'm sorry, I didn't think it would go that far. He'll come around right." I didn't answer any of them, because deep down, I knew. He wasn't the kind of man to storm out in anger. He didn't throw things or slam doors. He didn't argue to be right or demand attention. He just left. Quietly. Completely. And when someone like that walks away, it's not to make a point. It's because the pain has gone too deep to explain. The next morning, his side of the closet was untouched, his drawers still full, his toothbrush still sitting next to mine. But the silence in the apartment was deafening. I walked around slowly, not sure what I was looking for, some sign that he'd been back while I slept, that maybe this was just a pause, not an ending. but nothing had changed, except everything had. I tried calling again, straight to voicemail. I sent a long message. Not an excuse, just a confession. I told him I was wrong, that I had laughed to fit in not because I believed any of it, that I understood if he needed space but begged him not to mistake my silence in that moment as a reflection of how I truly saw him. I didn't say, "Please come home." I knew better than to ask for that. I just said, "Please talk to me when you're ready. I love you. I always have." He didn't respond. Days passed like that, each one heavier than the last. I stopped opening the curtains. I couldn't listen to music because every song sounded like him. I couldn't watch TV because every scene reminded me of a joke he used to make or a show we used to binge together on weekends. I didn't realize how many little pieces of him lived in everything until he was gone. And the guilt, it wasn't just emotional, it was physical. A constant ache in my chest, a tightness in my throat. My appetite disappeared. My sleep came in fits, haunted by the sound of his voice in my memories and the silence of his absence in the present. I would dream that he came back, that we talked, that I apologized and he forgave me. And then I'd wake up and realize it was still just me. Still just the echo of the night I broke something I couldn't fix. People asked me what happened and I didn't know how to answer without making myself sound cruel. Because when you say it out loud, I laughed at a joke about him with my friends, and he heard me. It doesn't sound like much, it sounds like something small. But that's the thing about pain, it doesn't have to be loud to be real. Sometimes it's the quiet betrayals that leave the deepest scars. I think what hurt the most was knowing how much he had trusted me. He'd told me once during a late-night conversation that I made him feel safe in a way no one else ever had. That he'd always felt like he had to prove something to the world, but with me, he didn't. With me, he could just be himself. And I had taken that trust, folded it into a careless joke, and tossed it into the hands of people who didn't even know the full story. People who didn't see him wake up early to make me coffee. Who didn't know he texted my mom to check in when I forgot. Who never saw the way he looked at me when I wasn't paying attention like I was something rare. Something fragile. Something worth protecting. I had made him feel like the opposite of all of that, and I hated myself for it. The hardest part was not knowing if he would ever come back, not knowing if he was somewhere deciding whether I was worth another chance or if he had already closed that chapter in his heart. I didn't know what he was thinking, or if he was even thinking about me at all. That kind of silence, it's worse than anger. At least with anger, you know there's still something there. But silence. It feels like the absence of hope. And yet, I waited. Every day, I left my phone on loud. I checked it constantly. Every time a notification popped up, I felt a flicker of hope, followed by the gut punch of disappointment. Every time I walked by the door, I half expected to see his shoes back on the mat, his keys back on the hook, but they never were. Eventually, the messages from friends stopped. They moved on. They got bored of saying, "I'm sure he'll come around." They didn't understand why I wasn't over it yet. But how do you explain that it wasn't about ego? It wasn't about sex jokes or embarrassment. It was about knowing that someone gave you their heart and you didn't hold it carefully enough. So I kept living, if you could call it that. Quiet mornings, long nights, trying to forgive myself. Trying to understand how something that lasted years could be undone in seconds, and wondering every single day if maybe, just maybe, he missed me too. It took me longer than I'd like to admit to really understand what I had done. At first, I was stuck in that space between guilt and denial, telling myself that it was just a joke, that he had taken it too seriously, that surely someone who loved me wouldn't walk away over one stupid moment. I replayed it over and over in my mind, picking apart my words, trying to convince myself it wasn't that bad. But the truth is, I wasn't looking for the truth. I was looking for a way out of the truth. Because facing it meant acknowledging the one thing I didn't want to admit, that I had humiliated someone I loved. And I had done it not in anger, not in some heated argument, but for entertainment, for a laugh. We're told growing up that teasing is harmless, that it's a sign of closeness, that the people we mock the most are the people we love the most. And I believed that for a long time. My friends and I bonded over sarcasm and roast sessions. We made fun of each other's bad decisions, our exes, our awkward habits. It felt like a language we all understood. We never took it personally. We laughed because we trusted each other. But there's a difference between teasing and disrespect, between a playful jab and a wound disguised as wit. And that line gets blurry fast when you're surrounded by people who treat emotional detachment as strength and vulnerability as weakness. What I came to realize slowly, painfully, was that the joke wasn't the problem. The silence was. I didn't say the worst parts. My friends did. But I let them. I didn't shut it down. I didn't say, "That's enough." I didn't stand up for him the way he had always stood up for me, even when I wasn't around to see it. In that moment, I chose approval over loyalty. And for someone like him, someone who struggled his whole life to feel enough that was more than just hurtful, it was shattering. It wasn't just what he heard. It was what I didn't say. The words I didn't speak that could have drawn a boundary that could have protected the sacredness of what we shared. Because love isn't just about what you do when you're alone together. It's about how you honor each other when no one is watching, or worse, when everyone is. I started thinking about the concept of emotional safety. I'd heard the term before thrown around in therapy articles and relationship podcasts, but I had never really considered what it meant in practice. Until I broke it. Until I saw in one flash of a second how fragile it was. Emotional safety means knowing that your person won't let others tear you down, that they won't laugh when others take shots at your insecurities, that they won't stay silent when your dignity is hanging in the air like a joke. And I had failed him. In front of everyone. I remembered the times he had quietly protected me, moments I hadn't even recognized as protection until now. Like the time one of his friends made a comment about how I talk too much when I drink. He didn't laugh. He just said, "She's passionate. It's one of the things I love about her." And that was that. Or when my ex had shown up uninvited to a party and I'd panicked not because I cared, but because I didn't want the drama. He noticed right away. He walked over, took my hand and said, "Do you want to leave no questions, no ego, just quiet support?" That was how he loved me. That was how he showed up, always. And I hadn't done the same for him. It's easy to dismiss words as just jokes when you're not the one they're about. When you're not the one who's already carrying the weight of old wounds, of years of feeling inadequate, of being compared and dismissed and told in 100 subtle ways that you don't measure up. I didn't put those insecurities there, but I sure didn't protect him from them either. I used to think that love was about saying the right things, grand gestures, big apologies. But now I know it's about the quiet moments. The moments when you're handed someone's trust and you have the choice to cradle it or crush it. And in a room full of laughter, I crushed his, without even realizing it. That's what made the guilt so heavy. Not that I meant to hurt him, but that I didn't even think about it. That I didn't value his heart enough to pause. That I didn't treat his vulnerability like the rare and sacred thing it was. Because men like him, men who let you see the softness they hide from the world, don't do that easily. They choose you for it. They believe you'll keep it safe. And when you don't, when you break that trust, they don't just feel betrayed. They feel exposed, foolish, ashamed for ever letting you see them that way. And that shame, it builds walls faster than any fight ever could. He didn't block me. He didn't curse me out. He didn't send a dramatic message. He just left. And in his absence, I was forced to sit with the truth that you can love someone deeply and still fail to love them well. That even good people with the best intentions can do harm when they stop paying attention. So now I carry the weight of that moment, not as a punishment, but as a lesson, a reminder that words have power, that silence has power, that love without loyalty is just decoration, and that if I ever get another chance to love, to protect, to show up, I will never again mistake cruelty for humor, or laughter for connection. Because the moment I did, I lost someone who deserved better than the joke I let him become. He never came back. There was no dramatic confrontation, no final conversation, no last-ditch text asking if we could talk. He just vanished from my life with the same quiet grace he had shown when he was still in it. He left behind no accusations, no blame, just the echo of the moment. I laughed when I should have defended, and the ache of knowing I would never be able to take it back. For a while, I kept hoping that he needed time, that he would come around, that eventually he'd miss me the way I missed him. But time passed and the silence didn't shift. It didn't soften. If anything, it hardened. The longer he stayed away, the more I realized he wasn't trying to hurt me. He was protecting himself. Because once you've been humiliated by the person you trust the most, forgiveness stops being a matter of love. It becomes a matter of self-respect. And I respected him for that, even as it broke my heart. I don't laugh like I used to anymore. Not because I've lost my sense of humor, but because I finally understand the weight of words. I understand how a room full of laughter can feel like a battlefield to the person who isn't in on the joke. I understand now that just kidding doesn't erase the sting that being silent when someone is being torn down is just another way of holding the knife. I understand that sometimes the damage you do in 2 minutes can outweigh 2 years of love. I still remember the sound of his voice. Not the way he said my name when he was happy or how he whispered goodnight. I remember the silence in his voice that night, the way he didn't yell, didn't ask, didn't fight, just looked at me like he didn't know who I was anymore. That silence said more than any scream ever could. So this is my closure. Not a happy ending, not a reunion, just a confession. To him, if he ever hears it. And to anyone out there who has ever been on either side of this kind of mistake, if you're the one who stayed silent while others laughed, say something next time. If you're the one who made the joke, think twice. And if you're the one who walked away, know that sometimes your silence teaches louder than words ever could. To the audience listening, thank you for hearing this story all the way through, for sitting with the discomfort, for reflecting maybe on your own words, your own moments, your own relationships. This isn't just about a breakup. It's about the fragile, powerful choice to protect someone when they aren't in the room, or when they're standing quietly at the door listening. Love deserves better than cheap laughs, and next time, if there ever is a next time, I will choose differently, because now I know the joke wasn't worth it.